Welcome to HRO Today's Leaders of Distinction, a podcast that brings you inside the minds of HR's game changers. I'm Amanda Cupido. HRO Today is known for celebrating achievements of HR, which is why we are joined by an award winner, Jason Munoz, the Director of Talent Acquisition at Entergy. He is the recipient of the Talent Acquisition Leader of the Year award, and on top of that, his team won the Talent Acquisition Team of the Year award. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, let's dive right in. You've been dedicated to talent acquisition roles for over 15 years. How have you seen this space evolve?
Bit longer than 15 years. When I joined, it went from Rolodexes and, fax machines and Excel spreadsheets to engage a lot of phone calls to now where we have AI enablement and global reach in our environment. So a lot has changed in that time. I think that when you look at the advocacy around utilizing technology, but also specializing the talent acquisition space versus just, HR or hiring managers doing that. It's really become a specialized industry that allows folks to really flex some muscle and be able to identify top talent and utilize cutting edge technology and tools on top of the tried and tested tools to really increase our ability to go out and source candidates and match them with the best organizations possible.
How have you been able to stay on top of it all? I feel like sometimes the innovation in this space can be overwhelming.
Well, I'm a student of the game, so to speak. So I've spent the career always wanting to learn, not just what we do, but how we do it. And, I came out of operations a long time ago. And part of that is always understanding the root cause. How do you continually improve and really meet the needs of the organization which you're in? That doesn't change inside of talent acquisition. So for me, it's always understanding what do we need to do to drive our performance forward, enable our teams to further grow and develop, but meet the needs of the organization in the changing landscape. I often say it like we're in the energy distribution and supply side of things, and the light bulb today does not look like the light bulb that we started with. So we have to constantly evolve to stay on top of it.
I love that analogy. All right. Well, one of the reasons why you won this award was because you were able to take the time it took to fill a position and decrease it significantly across the organization while at the same time enhancing candidate experience, recruiter performance, and cost efficiency. So, how the heck were you able to do all that?
The first part was when I joined Entergy. I spent the first few months listening, observing, getting out to meet different folks in the business at all different levels of the business, but then really focusing on how we did things. And essentially, we broke everything right back down to the basics. There's only 5 or 7 steps in recruitment, no matter where you go around the globe. And when you find the time adds in that, it's complexity that's usually built in when you think that you're building a robust program, but instead you're adding more steps that really take away from the end game, which is trying to identify, source, and engage candidates for a particular role and match them with a hiring leader in the shortest time period possible. So we just broke it all back down to basics. We looked at our systems, reconfigured the systems. We looked at how our team was constructed and aligned. We adjusted those. And then more importantly, though, we looked at what is that best in class time in each step of the recruitment process and what are the accountabilities and not just the responsibilities. And we rolled that out to the organization where we clearly identified who would be doing what, how we would measure what we did, and who was accountable for that. And that included our hiring leaders, our HR business partners, our reliance on our systems and that to really get that buy-in. And in doing so, we created dashboards that were transparent to the organization where we can truly see what's going on and we own what we do. And in doing that, it allowed us to really look at what are some of those barriers. Can we eliminate the barriers? Do we need to adjust the barriers? Or do we just need to relook at everything that we do? And we continue doing that. And that allowed us to decrease our time by 26 days in a 6-month period of time. And we've sustained that as we've come into this operating year.
That's incredible. There's so much I want to dig into on that answer. Okay, so first you talk about, getting back down to basics. What are some examples of some superfluous steps that might have, and you don't have to give an example specifically from Entergy, but just in general that you're seeing that people have in this process that maybe they should take a closer look at and maybe can be removed?
Across organizations, you see that you have, when you look at your grant of authority and approvals that you look at to, open a requisition, who interviews, who needs to interview, what level needs to approve, how many of those approvals do you need to have, how many interview sessions do you actually have, and how does that change your outcomes? If it's not changing the outcome, then why do you do it? Right. So it's really making that conscious step, and it's removing those pieces. If you've already approved the requisition, for example, the job posting to go out and find it, you generally have the financial, authority. You have your hiring leaders, request and authority to do that, and then their leaders. But then when you get into the interview, past the interview process and selection, you want to go to offer, you repeat in many cases those approvals that were there, and maybe you add more. And it's like, why are you doing that if you've already approved the position and the budget for that? The other part, when you look at your actual interviewing steps, how do you define who needs to interview and at what level, and how many rounds of interviews do you need to have? That for me is a key piece to go. Do you really need all of those? Is it going to change the outcome? What's the risk to the organization? What's the experience of both the leader and the candidate in doing that? But more importantly, what effect does that have in your time to productivity? And everything that we can do to reduce that time to productivity after is a benefit towards both the candidate and the organization. And then also looking at what do you do as a team to ensure that the candidates that you're moving forward have been properly pre-screened and are the best candidates that you can move forward. What steps do you take, and how do you explain that to help build that trust in those hiring decisions and truly become advisors and not just transactional?
All right, you're mentioning the team around this, and I want to dig in on that too, since your team was also an award winner. But I do think it's important to know you talk about productivity gain. You were able to quantify a $9.6 million productivity gain, which was part of the reason why you won this award. So, very impressive. Great tips. Like, talk about now leading a team through all of this and making sure you're getting people on board, especially with change, because sometimes people hold on to old processes. How do you get the team on board to really implementing shifts like this?
You have some of those crucial conversations at time, and we need to do it together, right? So I think that's a key part in any team that you have. It's very easy for a new leader to come in and go, this is what we're going to do, let's just do it, right? Not a lot of why goes into that, or inclusion that you have from your team members that actually have to execute on that to understand maybe why you are at the position where you are. So I had individual one-on-ones with the team. I talked with the leaders that were already in place here. I asked what their pain points were, and then I asked the business as well, what are your pain points and what are you seeing? Because perception rules the roost, but then I try to tie that back to data and what's the numbers actually showing us. We're then able to have those transparent conversations and make conscious decisions rooted in both the science and the data, but also what the needs were for the business. And we created those solutions together. Now, some of those are, this is what we need to do. How are we going to get there? Let me know. Others were, what can we actually do different? How can we imagine this together? What's that art of possibility to create a better outcome for everyone? And it wasn't easy. The team, going through change is not an easy. Change management's never an easy thing. When everybody says people don't like change, no, that's not true. If you didn't like change, you wouldn't have new clothes, you wouldn't buy new cars, you wouldn't do all this from the time we were born to now. It is being comfortable with that change, and how do you get people to that so that everyone can have a piece of ownership. My team has ownership in what they do. They have accountability, they have ownership. We're transparent on that. We measure that based on the same competencies for each team member, and we've outlined that. But more importantly, any solution that we have that we go forward with, we ensure that we're doing it together in a way that we know we can deliver on it. Because at the end of the day, I go back to what did we say we would do, and is it aligned? And if we can't measure it, repeat it, or scale it, we don't do it.
So many wise words in here. I want to go back and dig into the data element of all of this. And one of the points for why your team won this award was that they were able to introduce data driven decision making through enhanced reporting. And so I'm curious if you could give us some examples on what are some of those reporting lines that maybe didn't exist before, or how did you introduce certain metrics? Is there anything that people can take away from what you were able to implement?
When you look at a lot of applicant tracking systems now, that you have a very robust set of tools and metrics, right? But sometimes you need a PhD to understand what they
Yes.
and for me as well, it breaks it down into what are the basic things that anyone can understand in the organization, right? It's not just the team. There's data that I'll utilize in behind the team for what we do that I understand and go in, but the recruiters in that may not fully understand, well, how does that impact what we're doing? So we broke it down to what are those 5 or 7 steps. Based on that, if you go out into industry and the benchmarking that's already there, whether if it's Saratoga data, SHRM data, even some of the stuff that you find through HRO, but more importantly, just the cohorts that I'm in with others in best practice, how long should you be taking in each one of those steps? Opening a rec, to that intake call, then getting into how long did it take you to source and screen a candidate, how long in the interview step, how long in the offer, how long are you sitting inside your pre-hire background checks, whatever that may be, and then what's your notice period, right? And then we back that up into those steps of going each one of these buckets, what's the ideal time period that we want to be in to be best in class in what we do. And we set those as our goals to achieve for the year, but then we also have our aspirational timeframes. And in each one of those, we outline the key accountabilities and execution steps that need to be taken to achieve that. And then that's what we measured on. So we really broke it down into 7 buckets, individual buckets. And then we have 4 main that we track, which is our time to source and screen, our time to offer acceptance, our time to clear for hire, and then our time to start, which are the measurements that we look at. And it becomes very easy for not only us in TA and our HR counterparts and that, but also for the business to understand how we're actually tracking. And then I can separate that out by recruiter, by business, unit, operation, holistic view, to really narrowing it down to the nuts and bolts of what we do. In doing that, and in measuring in that way, it truly allows us to be effective in any outcomes that we're trying to achieve, because we have full accountability through the entire process, which I think is the main part behind any data. And we trust the data where it comes from. We had to reconfigure our systems to align with those steps. But also when you report out, the reports also have to align to that as well, so that you know that you have true data. And it's real-time data.
That's incredible. And I think some of these data points is why you won this award. It was so clear, some of the wins that you and your team have experienced. And so it's great to see these numbers coming up in your nomination form as well. What advice would you have to leaders who are trying to build out their talent acquisition team, or to leaders who have a talent acquisition team, but maybe they're not performing to the standard they want them to? What advice would you have?
Back to the basics. Keep it simple, right? It's the age old thing. And part of that, so for me, I run talent acquisition like a business, right? So you have to understand how each component is, what the output is from that, and what the cause and effect is. But you need to break it down to the basics. Building out this grandiose talent acquisition program, and you could bring in all the tools that you want, the latest tech, the latest ATS systems, all these integrations. But if it doesn't move the needle, then why are you doing it? So keep it basic. Look at the very basic functions that you have. Understand the root cause to the different areas that may be hindering you. And what is that? And what are those barriers? Are they self-imposed barriers in the organization? Or in some cases, like with us, we do have regulated barriers, right? There are laws that we need to follow. Then how are you making sure that you're achieving that and not overachieving? We always want to do more and more, and you always don't need to do that. It doesn't always change the outcome.
Before I let you go, I want to ask about your journey in talent acquisition. Why do you love talent acquisition?
You know, I'll be honest, I'm sure there's a lot of easier ways to make money, right? But
Yep.
and when I came into talent acquisition, I did not come in willingly. It was many years ago. I was in operations, and they were like, we want you to be in recruiting. And I was that hiring leader that didn't have a high opinion of recruitment. And, I said, I don't know anything about recruiting. He said, we'll teach you. Right. And I found a passion I never knew I had. And to this day, I'm still connected with some of the very first people that I recruited. And I've watched some of those individuals go from being a fresh out new grad to being CEOs of some organizations in senior leadership roles. Some of those people have become my mentors as well. And when you look at providing an opportunity for individuals, both internally and externally, and to see them throughout all the challenges succeed and do well, I don't think there's anything more rewarding than that. And, our space is ever changing. I can be a student of everything we do all the time. And the landscape, it doesn't matter if it's domestically or globally, it changes, right? But the concept is still the same. And I just love it. It became a passion, and it remains to be a passion. So
I can tell. Oh, well, if that doesn't convince a couple listeners to move over into talent acquisition, if they're not already, then I don't know what would. Looking ahead, final question. Looking ahead, what do you think is something that people in the talent acquisition space, other than back to basics, but in the future, what do you think people have to look ahead to or watch out for in the future of this space?
I think it's both. AI, no matter how you look at it, it is influencing what we do and how we do it. I think looking at AI as an enablement tool and not a replacing tool is going to be key. It's not going to replace all the things we do, but I think we should all learn the concepts and how to use that and how you can bring that in to help you with your transactional pieces so that you can get back into those white glove type services of people interactions that I think people really thrive for. So I think it's something to watch out for, but I think it's also something to embrace. I think we're in a very interesting inflection time, not only in our talent acquisition space, but when you look around the globe at the supply and demand for different types of roles, the challenges are shifting, right? And from that, we have to be able to adapt and see that around us. So, I don't think the challenges that we have are going to be any different than what they were 20 and 40 years ago. I think they're just boxed differently. I think that we have new capabilities as we do every single year in order to go out and find and source and engage with talent. And I think the biggest challenge, though, is being open to embracing what those new capabilities, technologies are, and ways of doing things in order for us to keep moving forward.
Well, brilliant. Nicely said. Thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time to chat. And thank you for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Wilson. Wilson drives business results through integrated talent solutions that help HR leaders stay ahead. Solve complex workforce challenges and build a sustainable talent engine by partnering with a firm that delivers results now and future-proofs your organization. Explore a fresh take on talent and see what Wilson can do for your enterprise. Visit wilsonhr.com today. This episode was produced by Lead Podcasting. I'm Amanda Cupido. Special thanks to Elliot Clark and Debbie Bola of Share Expertise Media. And for more information about HRO Today's digital magazines, research, e-newsletters, events, and social networks, visit hrotoday.com. This is award-winning content you need to check out. Bye for now.